Welcome back to the Last Minute Fantasy Scramble. We are here on week 2. Had an exciting first week of football. We are back. Already had a Giants-Washington game to kick us off for week 2. Not too bad for a Thursday night game. I'm your host, Kevin K. Macartney, alongside Bobby Digital Janas, and we are here to take you through your start, sit questions for week 2, get you prepared for this weekend, and get all of your questions answered. If you are listening in live, feel free to comment. We will get to all of your questions, whether start, sit, trade, waiver, whatever it is. We are here to answer. Bobby, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm ready for week 2.
All right. So we had a exciting week 1. Definitely fun to have football back. What was one of your biggest takeaways from week 1? One of your biggest surprises, or so you'd say, after that first weekend?
I think a lot of it has to do with the 49ers backfield in terms of surprises and what else is new. A lot of people, including myself, were very high on Trey Sermon. All the beat reporters said that he was the number 2 guy all camp. They invested significant draft capital in him. And then, shortly before the game, he's ruled inactive. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody's even really heard of Elijah Mitchell. He comes in, he dominates. And so, we'll get into that, I'm sure, a little bit later. Another surprise negatively was the Green Bay Packers and how awful they looked. We don't know. It's still week 1, but we don't know if it's just because how good the Saints defense is. Aaron Rodgers didn't have the best body language. I don't, that's there's a lot of questions there, but they really, got their butts handed to them. And then there was a lot of things that you did expect, like you expected Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins to perform well. You expected, your top tight ends like Kelsey and Kittle to ball out, and your Mahomes and Tyreek Hills to go off and have big games. So there was definitely some surprises, of course, but also some things that we kind of expected and were par for the course.
All right. So we have week 2 ahead of us. I know before we really break into all the different matchups, what are you most looking forward to, and what are you looking into fantasy-wise that's going to be answering some of those questions that week 1 left you wondering?
For me, it's the Tennessee Titans. Coming in this year, they bring in Julio Jones. They already have a stud A.J. Brown. They have Derrick Henry. And you expect their offense to light it up, and they just look completely atrocious. And their offensive line got destroyed by the Cardinals. Chandler Jones, 5 sacks. And so that's obviously a big thing you want to look for. How are the Titans going to respond? And is it going to be trouble for all of their guys? Now you're still going to roll out Henry and A.J. Brown, but for those who drafted them, or even Julio or Tannehill, is it going to sink everybody's value? And so that's going to be a big thing to watch going into next week, or this week, I should say.
All right, and speaking of value, I don't want to go too big into a breakdown on Thursday night's game, but I want to talk about values of a few specific guys and where you think they are 2 weeks in. Now, the first name I want to throw out at you was a guy who was drafted very high in the first round in pretty much all leagues, and that is Saquon Barkley, coming fresh off of an injury. What are your thoughts on how he has performed after 2 games, and are you buying or selling on Saquon right now?
So, I'm going to buy because, look, he had the ACL injury. According to doctors, everybody heals differently from their ACL. It's been a year now since Saquon hurt it. He hurt it last year in week 2. There are all reports coming out that, you knew that Saquon was going to take it easy. They were going to take it easy on him and slowly ramp up his workload. So, and again, the guy hasn't played football in over a year. And so you have to understand that Denver has a very good defense in week 1, so obviously he didn't do very well. Week 2, Thursday night, he's pretty much bottled up except for that 41-yard run, which was the old Saquon that we know and love. So I think slowly but surely, as each week progresses, you're going to see a little bit more of that Saquon that we know. And I think by midseason, he's going to be back to that top 5-6 back that we all know. Now, the only issue I have with Saquon isn't Saquon himself when he gets back to full health, but it's the team around him. Joe Judge, I don't think he's a very good coach at all. The Giants are just a negative organization, in my opinion. Their offensive line isn't very good either. But, Saquon's dealt with that before, and now they at least have more weapons on the outsides for him to not see so many stacked boxes. So, Yeah, I think Saquon's definitely a buy right now. But most likely the owner that drafted him, is probably drafted him in the first round, and so you're probably going to be unlikely to buy low on him unless the owner's really panicked. But it's still early in the year, so I'm buying Saquon though.
All right, so let's talk about another early running back that was drafted. This guy more around the second round, and that is Antonio Gibson. Um, did not look very good on Thursday night, but again, that mainly comes down to the coaching. You saw in a ton of different scenarios. He was basically vultured by McKissick, who came in there, even in goal line scenarios, and taking touches away from him. Does that concern you at all if you were in on Antonio Gibson?
I mean, it's definitely concerning for Antonio Gibson, no doubt. Seeing how J.D. McKissick seems to have been taking, those reps away. They were saying how they wanted to use McKissick like CMC, and he did have 23 touches in week 1. But, the fact that McKissick was involved in a higher amount than I'm sure a lot of Gibson owners thought is concerning. Obviously, I think Gibson still will be fine. He's still seeing the workload, and when it comes to running backs, you want guys that are going to see volume, so he's still going to see the volume, but his upside is going to be capped. It's going to be capped because you have McKissick there. Washington, again, obviously their offense, they have skill players, but they're not the best offense in the NFL. And so, I wouldn't say he has as other scoring opportunities opposed to running backs in better, more explosive offenses. So yeah, I think it's a hit on his value. I would be concerned in terms of the upside. Now, I think Gibson will still be just fine. Obviously, he's still going to be startable in fantasy, but most people I know that took Gibson in the second round were hearing that they're going to use him like CMC and expect that type of upside, and I don't think that's there because again, McKissick still remains involved in the game plan. Now, it's only week 2. Obviously, that can change, but they seem to love McKissick there, and so it'd be concerning for me. Absolutely.
All right, Terry McLaurin. There was a lot of negativity surrounding him as soon as Ryan Fitzpatrick went down, knowing that he's going to be partnered with Heineke. But now you're seeing that they have some chemistry. It seems both on and off the field, both of them hyping up each other. And do you buy into the Terry McLaurin hype?
Not 100%. To me, upside is guys that are going to go 35, 40 points, guys that are going to take slants 80 yards to the house, and McLaurin's not capable of that. Obviously, he's a great wide receiver. He has a high skill set, but he doesn't have that type of speed to do that. But he's a great receiver. We know that. He's in his third year. He's clearly the number 1 target for Heineke, and he's going to get the job done. I think he has more of a safer floor than higher of an upside. I think that the ceiling game is what you saw this past Thursday. Again, yeah, he has connection with Taylor Heineke, but it's Washington. Their defense is still good, so they might not be in many passing situations. And Taylor Heineke did look good, but he's still at best an average NFL quarterback. And so, you're going to have some games where Terry's a little quiet. I think he's safe in terms of his floor. I think his floor is like 6 for 60 in a PPR. That's like 12 points. But I think you're seeing his upside here. So I don't know.
So what's wrong with 27 points? I understand it's not a Tyreek Hill or a Devontae Adams kind of game, but what's not putting him in that next tier?
Because you need to see that consistently. Last year, he only scored 4 touchdowns. We need to see that on more of a consistent basis. I don't see them getting into many scoring opportunities like that. They don't have that high pedigree offense. And it's still Taylor Heineke, one way or another way, however you put it.
He was faced with a tough matchup
floor
on Thursday night, so I would argue that he does have a high upside going up against a tough matchup.
So would you take him over CeeDee Lamb?
Would I take him over CeeDee Lamb? Not right now.
Okay, Amari Cooper, Allen Robinson, Keenan Allen?
I think those are guys all around the same tier as him. I think they're all pretty comparable, to be honest.
Except, you're going to put Amari Cooper in that tier. I don't think that's fair. I think Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, both of them, I think are tier above those other guys. Even Allen Robinson, once the Bears settle in a little bit.
I don't know. Agree to disagree. All right, let's move on from there and let's talk
Washington,
about
Washington, man.
And he is the guy in Washington. He is the guy who's being thrown at. You're seeing this consistently, and I feel that he has such a high upside. and I feel that he is only improving as a player. You're seeing this year over year. And even whoever you put in that situation, throwing the ball to him, he's had like 5 different quarterbacks throw to him at this point, and he's continuing to prove that he is a solid. I'd say he's one of those second tier running backs, maybe bordering into that top tier of them.
I mean, I'm not saying he's not solid. He's a great wide receiver, and if he was with, I don't know, let's say he was in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers or something, like he would be a superstar, like stud in terms of fantasy. But dude, last week 4 for 62, man. Like, so we got to see it. Like, I'm not content with 5 for 50. Like, upside to me is 30 plus. Like, I'm gonna go score 30. I'm down, and I need someone to bring me back in the fantasy matchup and give me 35 points. He's not gonna do that.
All right, well, we'll just have to wait and see how this season goes. But I think we've argued about this long enough. Let's move on to a couple of New York Giants wide receivers I want to talk about real quick. Starting with Sterling Shepard. Actually, you know what? Let's do it this way. Are you targeting any Giants wide receivers? Are you going to start any of them?
I mean, me personally, no, because it's the Giants. For me, coaching staffs and teams, even if the player's talented, sometimes scares me away in fantasy. And Joe Judge, I'm not sold on Daniel Jones either. Their offensive line isn't very good, but Sterling Shepard had 2 good games, and the previous week was against a good Denver defense as well. And Daniel Jones seems to have the best chemistry with him and trust him. So if you're playing in a PPR league, you can trust Sterling Shepard as a wide receiver 3. Definitely more valuable if you start 3 wide receivers in a flex. So I would start Sterling Shepard. Kenny Golladay, I know you have him, K-Mac. I was watching the game too. Like, Kenny Golladay got open a few times, and Daniel Jones just missed him. And I think they just have to work together. Golladay was in and out. I think they have to build more chemistry together. But it's just the Giants, man. I just think the upside's always capped because I don't think Daniel Jones is it, And again, their offensive line isn't very good.
And their coaching staff is very questionable as well.
Yeah, and Jason Garrett's the offensive coordinator. He made some questionable play calls last night. So if you're asking me if would I start Sterling Shepard, yes. If you're asking me who would it be, Shepard or Golladay, I think right now it's got to be Shepard in a PPR league. Obviously, you're not sitting Golladay. I mean, you're not dropping Golladay because he has that upside. They paid him a lot of money, and in my opinion, Kenny Golladay is a true number 1 wide receiver skill set in the NFL, and he's capable. But I just don't see him reaching that upside with the Giants.
Yeah, and it's hard to see whether him and Daniel Jones are going to click. It's not looking like it right now. He is the most talented receiver on that team, but it seems like Sterling Shepard right now is the guy he's connecting with, and honestly, if I didn't have to, I wouldn't start any Giant, really.
Yeah, I wouldn't, and that's one thing real quick I want to point out, and I made this mistake too. It's like we can look at fantasy, whatever, but like you got sometimes it's important to look like in training camp and preseason and off season. How much practice time are these guys getting with each other? How well do these guys know each other? Like Tannehill and Julio. Like Tannehill had COVID, and I think Julio was limited for a little bit with a hamstring. Julio's played with the same quarterback all his career, and so you could see that they were kind of off. Same thing with Daniel Jones and Kenny Golladay. Kenny Golladay was in and out with a hamstring issue, and I think he had another type of small injury in camp, and he was in and out. And then you're seeing how he's favoring Sterling Shepard, who he's been with for now, I think 2-3 years. So that type of stuff comes into play more than you might think in fantasy.
All right, so you talked about Julio Jones. I want to start getting to some of our questions. Rashid asks, are we trusting AB this week, or should I roll with Julio?
Yeah, I saw this question. I'm going to take Antonio Brown, only because I just think, obviously, they both have good matchups, but I think Brown's a sell high in terms of his value is very high right now, that he might be a little higher than it will be, but that doesn't mean to say that Antonio Brown's going to be an excellent fantasy option for you, especially considering where he was going in drafts. And so with Julio, I think you just have to see it first. I think you just if you can afford to sit Julio, which obviously you can with AB having that choice, I think you got to sit Julio and roll with AB here. Just take the more stability at quarterback, the more chemistry with Brady. As opposed to Tannehill and Julio might take a few weeks to connect. And I don't know what to expect for Tennessee either, man. They could still come out flat again, too. There's a lot of question marks with Tennessee, especially that comment that Vrabel made about Julio with that uncharacteristic unnecessary roughness penalty, and Vrabel kind of called him out on it. Like, I don't know if there's something going on behind the scenes there. But anyway, the point is, I would go with Antonio Brown for that one.
So you touched on an interesting point, and I want to take a moment to talk about that. Tennessee Titans, they were supposed to have one of the best offenses in the NFL this year. There was a lot of hype around them, a lot of hype about Ryan Tannehill getting to that next level. You've seen only improvement since he left the Miami Dolphins. And now you're pairing A.J. Brown with one of the most athletically talented wide receivers we've seen, like, of our generation right now, in Julio Jones. Yeah, he may be on the tail end of his career, but you've seen when he's healthy, he still has it. And you have Julio Jones, you have A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry's not going anywhere. Do you think that offense that we saw last Sunday was a sign of what we're supposed to see the entire season? Are you concerned? Or do you think that this can live up to the hype that we've talked about all offseason?
I mean, it certainly can. Obviously, you have guys that talented, it can certainly live up to it. But to say I'm not concerned would be a lie. And I know it's only week one, so it's concern is different from full-on panic, worried. But it's definitely concern. I mean, look, Tannehill had COVID, and that affected Cam Newton. That might have affected him now. Like we mentioned earlier, he didn't have the practice time with Julio. And the other thing, again, is Arthur Smith did a wonderful job with Tennessee and Tannehill, and he's now in Atlanta, and so they have a different offensive coordinator, and that also, I think, is playing a part. Or you can just look at it from the other point. Maybe the Cardinals' defense is just that good, like J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones. That's why I said it's week one, so it's just so hard to tell. Can they live up to the hype? Yes, absolutely. I would not panic. But be concerned, yeah, absolutely. Every reason to be concerned with this offense. And my guess, if you had to ask me, if I had to put my money on it, I would say that they might start slow, and I think as the season goes along, they will start to click and reach that production that you expected them throughout the year. I just think, in my opinion, it might take a few games for them to gel a little bit. And the last thing I'll mention is about the Mike Vrabel Julio thing too. Like, I don't think so, but you never know. Like, I don't know if there's something under the surface, some sort of rift there. I don't know. But I'm definitely hopeful for the future Tennessee, but a little concerned. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. What's up, Andrew? Thank you for watching in the show. We got your question, about to answer this right now. Bobby, Andrew asks, starting Mike Williams and Hollywood Brown for his 2 flex spots. He's got Jamal Williams and Nelson Aguilar on the bench. You think he should keep as is or swap one of them in, half-point PPR?
Yeah, so I'm going to keep Big Mike in. Love the matchup against Dallas. But I'm going to put in Jamal Williams for Hollywood Brown. I think Hollywood Brown had a good game and all that, but Jamal Williams, man, I mean, I guess if you want to buy into the revenge game narrative, but Jamal Williams had 16 touches, I believe, and he's the number 5 fantasy running back right now. Point being is he's very involved in this offense. It's Goff basically funneling to Swift, Williams, and Hawkinson. They didn't sign Williams for that kind of money just to leave him on the bench. He's a capable NFL running back. He's going to see more opportunities, so you got to go with the volume there. You expect Detroit to be behind in this game and have to continue to throw, and Jamal Williams is a very good pass-catching running back as well. So I will take Big Mike, and then I would sub out Hollywood and go with Jamal Williams there.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. All right. So this next question is coming in from Kyle, who asks, Corey Davis or Tyson Williams?
Yeah, I'm going to take Corey Davis there. Tyson Williams, I think, look really good, but they did come out and say they're going to use multiple backs. Lamar caps his upside as well. Latavius Murray might see more snaps. So I'm going to take Corey Davis there.
All right. And what about Mike Davis or Tyson Williams? Jay asks.
Yeah, so this is a good one. I'm going to actually take Tyson Williams because Tyson Williams has at least an explosive ability to be able to break one. Mike Davis and this Falcons offense going against the Bucs. The Bucs are a rock-solid run defense, and they've proven that last year and the year before and on this past Thursday night, previously against Dallas, shutting Zeke down. And that Falcons O-line didn't look good at all. So, I'm going to take Tyson there.
All right. So this next question comes in from Dennis, who asks Deebo Samuel or Kenyon Drake at the flex position.
I'll take Deebo Samuel. They came out, they said Peyton Barber is going to get a significant amount of carries, plus the Raiders are playing Pittsburgh. Don't want any parts of that. Deebo Samuel looks like the number one wide receiver right now, especially because we don't know what's going on with Ayuk. So Deebo Samuel there.
All right, that San Francisco offense is weird, right? Like, just trying to predict what's going on in that offense in general.
You're telling me.
Like, both at the running and the receiving position, and Shanahan just speaks in riddles, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He does. The thing is with them, man, it's like, if it was a bad offense, it's like it doesn't matter because you're not paying attention to it anyway. But the fact that there's like a fantasy gold mine there in terms of if you have that running back, whoever's that guy, you know, he's producing. I think I mentioned it on one of the previous podcasts. Last year, whoever was starting for the Niners each week ended up, if it were one guy, it would have been like it's the fourth best running back in PPR and total fantasy points. Like, that's how valuable whoever the starter is in San Francisco is. And Shanahan's a brilliant mind in terms of drawing up the schemes and the zone running schemes and all that.
It's not fantasy friendly, though.
Too. Well, it's not in terms of you don't know who the guy is.
Yeah.
If there was one guy that you know, it's fantasy friendly. And same thing with the receivers. Like, Ayuk shown that he's had great value. Deebo Samuel, we know Kittle. Kittle's probably the only consistent thing there. He's a consistent top 3-4 tight end. But it's like it's a tease, honestly.
Absolutely. All right, so this next question comes in from Trey. Full PPR, Visca or Mitchell?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I'm not sold on Mitchell. I think it could potentially be a trap. But
as we were just saying.
Yes, but I'm also not. I don't want honestly anything to do with Jacksonville. And I don't see it for Shenault, honestly. Especially against a very good Denver defense they're going up against. So, you know, out of those two, I'll go with Mitchell.
All right. Andrew asks, I'm going to start Jarvis Landry with Odell Beckham Jr. being out over Darrell Henderson in my flex. Half-point PPR. What do you guys think?
I like it. You know, I like it. I'm not fully sold on Darrell Henderson either. I think Sony Michel's going to – they didn't spend draft picks to get Sony Michel for no reason. I think he's going to slowly increase as the season goes. And look, Sean McVay clearly loves Matthew Stafford, and it fits his system perfectly, and I think they're just going to throw a lot here. Xavier Rhodes for the Colts is out as well, so it's a good matchup through the air. And who was it again? I'm sorry, I just blanked out. And,
it was just Henderson or Jarvis Landry.
Or Jarvis Landry. I'm going to go so in that I'm going to go with Jarvis Landry, half-point PPR, no Odell, against a good matchup against Houston. Landry, obviously, we know he gets his receptions. He's had that chemistry with Baker, so I'll take Landry.
All right. Max asks, Stafford or Hurts?
Yeah, I saw this one. I'm actually going to take Matt Stafford here. Jalen Hurts obviously looked great. He has upside. Going against a tougher 49ers defense, but it's not less about Hurts. I just trust Stafford this year, man. Like, I trust McVay. Stafford's rejuvenated. He's been a good quarterback, but he's just been in Detroit for so long, and now McVay's fully unlocking him. And the thing with Stafford, you just saw it on Sunday night. Like, he's playing with absolute passion and excitement and confidence, and that relates to fantasy because that'll impact his performance. And so it's a matter of who I trust more, and I trust Matthew Stafford more than Hurts, so I will take Stafford there for this week.
All right, and with that, without giving you any kind of preparation, we are going to transition into rapid fire breakdowns for Sunday, starting with Texans at the Browns.
We mentioned it earlier. Baker can be a good streamer for you. You're starting Landry. Chubb, obviously, top 3 running back this week. Kareem Hunt as well. It can be a good flex PPR. As for Houston, I'm still avoiding this backfield against a good defense. Really, the only guy you can start in Houston is, honestly, Brandon Cooks. Expect the Browns to win big and control this one.
All right, so the next game that we have is going to be the Los Angeles Rams against the Indianapolis Colts. What do you got in that game?
Not as scary for the Rams as you might think. Colts missing some starters on defense, so you roll out Stafford, you roll out Kupp, Woods as well, Tyler Higbee also. You can start Darrell Henderson as RB3 with some low upside in my opinion. As for the Colts, can't really trust anybody there except Jonathan Taylor. Nyheim Hines can be used as a flex in a PPR league. He did see a good target share. Keep an eye on the receivers for Indianapolis and check out the targets.
All right, so this next game I know has a lot of personal implications for you. We got the Buffalo Bills at the Miami Dolphins. What's your takeaway from this particular game?
Well, fantasy-wise, Will Fuller's going to be out. I can't trust Tua quite yet. Buffalo defense looked pretty good. I love Jalen Waddle in this spot. I think he's going to have a great game. They're going to have to pass as well. Myles Gaskin can be trusted as a low-end RB2. As for the Bills, you can start Allen, Diggs. Temper your expectations because Miami has one of the best secondaries in football.
Yes, they do.
Check Zach Moss or Singletary. If both of them are active, avoid. Sanders can be used as a wide receiver 3.
All right, and who's going to win that game?
The Dolphins, obviously.
All right, after that, another AFC East matchup between the Patriots and the Jets.
Kind of ugly fantasy-wise. You can roll with Damian Harris if you'd like, but again, to me, his upside's limited because of White and Stevenson. I'm not really into the Patriots wide receivers. Check this injury report on Jonnu Smith. You could start him as a back-end tight end 1. As for the Jets, you could probably just roll with Corey Davis, and honestly, that's really about it there. Keep an eye on Crowder. He's healthy. See where the target share goes with him and more.
All right, next we have the 49ers at the Eagles.
Obviously, you're starting George Kittle. Avoid Jimmy Garoppolo. The running game I can't talk about right now. It's too crazy. But if you put the waiver claim in for Mitchell, you're probably starting him.
Mitchell Madness Mania.
That's it. Debo's a great start as well. As for Philly, it's going to be Hurts. You're going to start Goddard, and you're going to start Devonta Smith.
All right, so our next matchup, we have the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Steel Curtain in Pittsburgh.
The only player you're going to be starting from the Raiders is Darren Waller. He is matchup proof, and he's in your lineup every single week. As for the Steelers, Najee Harris should bounce back in this one. I'm not a fan of those 3 receivers, but they are all startable wide receiver 3s. Big Ben, if you're desperate, can be a decent QB streamer. Not a lot of upside, but he will provide you with a solid floor in this one.
All right, he put the win in Winston. That is famous Jamas going up against the Carolina Panthers. What's your takeaway on this matchup?
Jameis Winston is definitely in play as a streamer. You're obviously starting Kamara. Juwan Johnson is somewhat interesting, but 2 of his 3 catches were just touchdowns, so be wary of that. Nobody else on the Saints I'm looking to start. Tony Jones Jr., though, keep an eye on him as well. Desperation flex. He saw some good carries, and PFF ranked him first overall in terms of running backs for week 1. And then for the Panthers, it's really just CMC and DJ Moore. I can't trust anybody else.
All right, so that takes us up to our next matchup. We have the Denver Broncos and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Game of the week, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, if I can help it, I am not starting anyone, and I mean anyone, on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Urban Meyer does not know what he's doing, in my opinion. They have not a very good team, low morale. Meanwhile, Denver is going to be a very good team. They have a very good defense. They're going to control the clock, so you can start both Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, in my opinion, as RB2s this week. Noah Fant's a solid high-floor tight end as well. As for the receivers, we mentioned Tim Patrick on the waiver column. If you're desperate, start him. I'd be weary on Sutton only because he's still recovering from the ACL.
And we have the Vikings at the Cardinals. Got to cut you off once.
Kind of hard game to predict because we don't know if the Cardinals defense was just an anomaly or whatnot, but you're obviously starting Dalvin, you're obviously starting Jefferson and Adam Thielen, and that's really it. I can't trust Kirk Cousins. As for the Cardinals, you're starting Murray and Hopkins as well. Edmonds is a good flex. Connor as a desperation touchdown-dependent running back this week. The other wide receivers in Arizona have high upside, but it's just hard to predict which one it will be. It will be one of them, but it's just got to roll the dice with the upside between Kirk and Moore.
All right, we have the Atlanta Falcons up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Both Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts saw 8 targets each. I don't know why they got away from them. They were going to them in the first drive. I think Arthur Smith looks at the film and decides to throw on them. So expect bounce backs from both Ridley and Pitts, but I'm still avoiding Matt Ryan. Avoid Patterson and Davis like the plague. As for the Bucs, you're starting Tom Brady. You're starting the receivers there and Rob Gronkowski. Bruce Arians said Ronald Jones will start. Roll the dice and go at your own risk.
All right, don't bring your knives to this one because this is going to be a shootout. Cowboys at Chargers.
Fire everyone up in this one. Herbert, Eckler, even though I'm not an Eckler fan and he didn't have any catches, you still got to start him based on where you drafted him. Big Mike in for a great game. Jared Cook saw 8 targets. He's in for a good game. Keenan Allen as well. As for the Cowboys, you're obviously starting Dak. Lamb and Cooper are going to explode. Zeke is going to bounce back this one as well. Can't trust the tight ends because they split time.
All right, and another late game that should be fun. Titans at the Seahawks.
Should be fun, but buyer beware. There's going to be rain in this one. Don't forget, 12th man is back for Seattle, and that makes a huge impact. Tennessee, are they going to put up or are they going to shut up, basically, is the bottom line. I don't know what's going to happen, but you have to trust you have to trust Henry Brown. Julio's on the fence as well as Tannehill. As for the Seahawks, you're obviously starting Russ, DK, and Lockett. And Carson, their third receiver, Eskridge, is out, so those guys should be more of a funnel. Cannot trust Everett.
All right, can Lamar Jackson get his first win against Patrick Mahomes? Chiefs-Ravens, Sunday Night Football.
I don't think they're going to win the game. Their offensive line is too much concern, too many injuries. But obviously, you're starting Lamar Jackson. Like we mentioned, Tyson, if you're desperate, has some upside, but it's going to be a committee. Mark Andrews, where you drafted him, you got to start him. And Hollywood Brown for the big play for the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, there's nothing else to say. It's Mahomes, it's Kelsey, it's Hill, CEH as an RB2 with low upside. And honestly, that's really about it in this one.
All right, in the anticlimactic Monday Night Football, Lions at Packers.
Still, honestly, do not know what to expect. You would think that the Packers are going to bounce back and destroy the Lions, but you're not sure yet. Obviously, you're starting Rodgers, Aaron Jones, Devonta Adams, and Robert Tonyan. As for the Lions, it's three guys. It's Jamal Williams, it's TJ Hawkinson, and it's DeAndre Swift. Don't even get cute or don't even try anyone else on the Lions.
No Amon-Ra St. Brown?
That's a negative.
All right, so that is time for our rapid fire. How was it doing it by yourself this time?
It's stressful, man. I got to drink some water, man. I got
Yeah, no John or Bud to carry the load with you. That was a good job breaking down all those games. Really appreciate it. And there is no rest for the weary. Going to bring you right into this next question from Leroy, who asks, are you ready for a kicker question?
Oh, really?
Koo or McPherson from the Bengals kicker all season?
The Falcons kicker or the Bengals kicker?
Yes.
I mean, who are the Bengals playing? They're playing
No,
Chicago.
all season.
This
is to pick your kicker to live with. Ride or die with Koo or McPherson.
Q helped me last year, and he's a stud kicker. He was with Atlanta last year, so I'll just take him again this year. I'll take Young Wei Koo.
All right. So
no more kicker questions.
A real fantasy football question from Christian comes: Carson or Thielen in the flex?
A lot of this might depend on your setting, but I think regardless of the setting, I'm still going to take Chris Carson. I mean, Adam Thielen, he just caught some touchdowns. He'll be involved, but Carson's the guy in Seattle, and he's also somewhat involved in the passing game. Got to be Carson.
All right. I know we've talked about both of these guys already, but Philip asks Julio Jones or Elijah Mitchell in the flex.
Yeah, here I'm going to take Julio. I think Julio has a better chance, a little more upside here. Elijah Mitchell can just burn you, honestly, especially if it's any sort of half or full point PPR. I'm gonna lean Julio there.
All right. Jeremy asks a tight end question here: Gerald Everett or Jonnu Smith? I know Smith is questionable, but do I still leave him in my lineup?
Well, check. Obviously, you're going to check. If Smith plays, I think you got to start Jonnu Smith. Gerald Everett split time with Will Dissly, and he did catch a touchdown, but he only had 2 catches, so only had, I think it was 3 or 4 targets. So, yeah, it's Jonnu for me. And if Jonnu doesn't play, then you can pivot to Everett in the 4:00 game.
All right. So another question about Tyson Williams. Seem to be getting a lot of those today. Do you start Tyson Williams or Myles Gaskin?
Yeah, I'm going to take Gaskin because even though Malcolm Brown and Ahmed played an uncomfortable amount of snaps, Gaskin's still the primary guy there. And, without Will Fuller, I think they're going to hopefully look to get Gaskin more the ball more to help move the ball. And for Tyson Williams, like we mentioned earlier, it's part of a committee. And he has upside, of course, but, he's not going to see the field as much. I think Murray's going to slowly take his reps. And obviously we know that Lamar's the main running back in terms of rushing yards on this team. So I'm going to go with Gaskin there.
All right. This next question comes from Joseph, who asks, Mitchell, Myers, Smith, Robbie, Davis, pick 2.
Which Smith?
I don't know. Mr., Mrs.? Which Smith we talking about here?
I mean, you could say Jonnu Smith. You could say Devontae Smith.
We're just going to exclude Smith here. Joseph, if you're listening, let's get some first names next time, but I appreciate the question. Outside of Smith, who are the others?
So we have Elijah Mitchell and Robbie Anderson. And who else?
Davis. Is that all right? What Davis
Corey
is that?
Davis.
Corey Davis.
I would assume Corey Davis, right? There's no other Davis. I don't.
Yes, Mike Davis, but I guess we're talking all wide receivers
Mike Davis,
here.
True. Well, Mitchell,
that's
though,
true.
So I can't really decide that either because that's significant, Mike or Corey.
Yeah,
Davis.
sorry. With common last names like that, a first name would be appreciated.
Please,
So
thank you.
let's move on to this next one. Also, when asking questions, always appreciate the standard or PPR. When in doubt, we are going to assume PPR. So Mike asks Mitchell or Drake standard scoring.
Man, no, you got to go with Mitchell there for the reasons I said. Go with Mitchell.
All right. And before we get into any other questions, I know we ran down all the matchups really quick for you, rapid fire style, but is there any game in particular that you wanted to talk a little bit more about?
Honestly, I mean, look, that Ravens Chiefs game I think is going to be a fun one. It's not really any particular, honestly. I think it's just hard in week one to know if it was just an anomaly or if it was a sign of things to come, in particular with Tennessee, with Atlanta, and with Green Bay's offenses. But I think in terms of the 49ers running back situation, I said I wanted to expound on that a little more. I'm a Trey Sermon investor. Obviously, I've done a lot of reading up on and research and being on forums and stuff about both of these guys. And it's hard to say because they're saying now Trey Sermon looked aggressive and focused in practice throughout the week. And we still don't know why he was benched. Was it because he really wasn't living up to their potential and he went with Mitchell, Shanahan did? Or was there some sort of incident with him? Same thing with Ayuk. It's a little strange what's going on. I'm a zero RB guy, so I'm personally starting Trey Sermon this week because I think that they invested the draft capital in him, and there was nothing coming out other than saying he was the number 2 guy in camp. All camp preseason dictated that. They released Wayne Gallman. I wouldn't be surprised if Trey Sermon comes out and gets 15 to 20 carries in this one. But then again, Elijah Mitchell looked really good. I mean, he showed burst. He's faster than Sermon. He's more explosive than Sermon. Obviously, he had a great game. So it's just really hard to say. But I think someone will emerge from this backfield. It's just hard to say what they're going to do. So if you have Mitchell, if you paid the amount of waiver on Mitchell, I know you paid K-Mac, and you were telling me that. I
paid a lot.
You were telling me that if he's, the upside of him being the next James Robinson, which obviously it's there in that system, you're willing to live with, spending that money if it doesn't work out. So he still got to, I think if you pay that much for Mitchell, obviously he's important to you. I think you have to start him. But I'm just saying, don't be surprised if if Shanahan pulls the rug out from under us again. What's your take on Mitchell and the 49ers backfield?
So I think you spoke a lot of the same thing I'm feeling. Like, I know a lot of these things we don't always see eye to eye on, but I can agree with you for the most part on that. I did spend heavily on Elijah Mitchell. I paid a little over 40% of my fab budget on him, and the major reason being because if you look back on a lot of seasons, a lot of these guys break out in their first couple of weeks. These, I feel, are extremely important weeks to be attacking that waiver wire, trying to find those guys when they first show that little glimpse of being the guy before they're too expensive or before somebody else snags them up. So look at James Robinson last year. If you didn't get him in that first couple of weeks, our very first show was called the James Robinson Show. We were very high on him. I know Bud, one of our hosts who is not here today, somewhere across the seas, he was one of the first person who brought me on to James Robinson. I went and snagged him up right away, and he was a great addition to my team. Ended up trading him on later in the year. But I got Aaron Jones and Calvin Ridley out of him, but that's besides the point. He was a great addition to my team, and he's somebody who went undrafted. And you look at some of these undrafted guys, and let's take a look back at Elijah Mitchell. You mentioned that speed. You mentioned that explosiveness. That's something that Raheem Mostert had, and that's something that they loved out of him. All right, Raheem Mostert might be like one of the fastest running backs in the league, has that explosiveness and ability to attack that outside edge. And that's what the 49ers liked in him. That's what they saw in him. And you're clearly seeing that they saw the same kind of thing from Elijah Mitchell, and that he may be able to fill that Mostert role, especially when they wanted to come in. And the original idea, at least what you're hearing all offseason, is seeing Mostert and seeing Trey Sermon be able to work in there together. And worst case scenario, I mean, as long as he could stay healthy, which seems to be a major curse for these 49ers running backs, Elijah Mitchell has that potential to fill that role. And as Bobby mentioned earlier, the starting 49ers running back, whoever that may be, like if you're playing in one of those, I know that a lot of leagues will do like team quarterback. If you're going with team running back here, I think the 49ers should be like the top of your like list. Like they are outside of these like main guys, but when you go into committees or when you go into not knowing who the guy's going to be week for week, like the 49ers are a pretty good lock to whoever's running the ball there is going to produce points. And now I want that whoever that guy producing points is going to be on my team. I know before the year, one of the draft strategies I even talked about since I had a first pick in one of my leagues was to try to target actually both Mostert and Trey Sermon on that turn, because whoever is going to end up taking over that role, and as long as they could stay healthy, and it might be two people, it might be Mitchell, it might be Sermon, it might be Jeff Wilson coming back from injury. There are so many options that it could be, but whoever's running the ball in San Francisco, I want a part of that. It's just a risk right now. So as Bobby said, if you're spending a lot on Elijah Mitchell, you got to start him. I spent a lot on Elijah Mitchell, and I'm not going to be starting him this week. I do want to see what he's capable of, and whether that ends up being me turning him into a trade that I could use later down the line, or turning into a dependable starter that I could use. I mean, in that league, I already do have Nick Chubb and Joe Mixon. I'm probably not going to be starting another running back in that league, so enough talking about my own personal league. But I do say, if you need to start Elijah Mitchell, I think that he is a good start this week. Me personally, I want to keep a little bit more of an eye on him, but his upside is too much to turn down on. I would regret not spending more on him if he does turn out to be that next James Robinson. Well, in this case, all right, I lose 40% of my fab. I might not be able to bid on this next guy, but what if this was the guy for the season? If you could go back in a time machine and decide, oh, sorry, I didn't want to spend 40% of my fab on James Robinson, and you look back and think, what was I thinking? Like, I would have spent 75% or more. He is a league winner. And sometimes you just have to take a risk and go after those guys.
I couldn't agree more. And that's kind of philosophy I used when I took Ridley late in the first round this year is, what if I believe that he's going to be the number one overall fantasy receiver, if I had a time machine and let's say he is that, and I didn't take him in that round and then someone took him in the second before me, I would have regretted it. So that's the type of thinking. I couldn't agree with you more. What you're saying, K-Mac, it's that's honestly what wins you leagues is that upside, that gem that you find, like you said, especially in these first few weeks of the season when you can really start to look at these guys that emerge in all positions. Like last year, James Robinson, but not only that, but T.J. Hawkinson, was still a free agent at times in this part of the year. Robert Tonyan, they ended up both being good tight ends for fantasy this past year. Justin Jefferson was a free agent most likely this time last year.
And I dropped him early on in the year, so. A lot
Exactly.
of people did, though.
A lot of people
3-4 weeks
right.
into the season last year, a lot of people went and dropped Justin Jefferson, but look what
Yes.
ended up happening to him.
Exactly. So, it's a good point about, chasing that upside, going for the risk, but also, keep an eye on the waiver wire, especially always the waiver wire, but especially in these first, few weeks. So,
and fair warning, I am attempting to do a waiver move in the coming days that I may be dropping Amon-Ra St. Brown. So if that's anything like Justin Jefferson last year, you may want to go and grab him now.
I don't know about. Hey man, fair warning though. You said fair warning. So.
I'm just letting the audience know now. If I do anything like I did last year, I guess maybe make a move towards Amon-Ra St. Brown. Just saying that, putting that out there in the world. All right, let's get back to some of these questions. All right, Brian asks, Henderson, Melvin Gordon, or James Robinson?
Man, that's a tough one actually. You know what? I'm gonna take Melvin Gordon. He's splitting time with Devonta Williams, and they're playing a very good matchup against Jacksonville. Believe it or not, Melvin Gordon recorded the fastest speed of Week 1 on his 75-yard run, which means I always thought Melvin Gordon was more of an average running back in his career. He's put up some good numbers, but he was never anything over the top spectacular in my opinion. But they're playing the Jacksonville. He's going to get the workload. You expect them to be up in this game, so they might just pound the run with him and Javonte. So in terms of the best bet of producing, it's close for me between Gordon or Henderson. I'll slightly lean Gordon there.
All right. So Mitch asks, need to start 2. Landry, Keenan Allen, Cooper Kupp, standard league.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. It's going to be Keenan Allen and Cooper Kupp, even in a standard. You still going to roll with Keenan there.
All right.
And
So
Kupp.
we are picking 2 from Mitchell's choice, and that is Chris Godwin, Robert Woods, or Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, if this is a PPR league, I'm actually going to go with the receivers here. Robert Woods had somewhat of a quote-unquote down game, but this offense is something you want to have shares in this passing game. And so I'm going to go with Woods. And obviously Godwin, I mean, you don't know who it's going to be for the Bucs, but Godwin seems to be have a consistent target share here. Very good wide receiver as well. Edwards-Helaire, man, we talked about it with Bud a little bit and touched on a little bit here. You know, you would think that a guy like that in that offense would be a stud, but he just doesn't have the upside. It just, he doesn't have it. Like, for some reason, Darrell Williams, they're throwing the ball, whatever. So yeah, I'm going to take Godwin and Woods, assuming it's a PPR league.
All right. So this next guy, Sean, has a couple of quarterback questions, and I personally will jump out ahead and say, if you're having yourself this question, make a trade. All right? That's all I'm going to say. All right, but I'm going to bring this question to you, Bobby. First part of the question, Dak or Lamar?
Wow. I have both in some of my leagues. I'm going to take Dak. I like the matchup. I think you want any piece you can in that game. I'll take Dak.
All right. And the second part of that question is Brady or Stafford?
Another great question. I'm going with Stafford.
All right. And I want to get your take on this also. So if you have 2 top quarterbacks like on that, I don't see why you don't trade one of them. You don't need to have a guy of that caliber, whether it ends up being Lamar or Stafford, Brady or Dak. If you're sitting one of those guys, then you've made some kind of mistake with your team. Nothing against having too much talent on your team, but I know it's very likely that somebody could have drafted Brady or Stafford, but you're seeing now that both of them have that talent, and it's just, to me, it feels like you shouldn't keep both of those guys on your team when you could very easily trade one of those away for a pretty good running back or wide receiver. I just don't see, personally, the reason to keep 2 top quarterbacks on your team. Like, in any instance, if you are benching Dak Prescott, I think you're doing something wrong. I think that he has the potential to be, I think he's by far the best quarterback out of all those guys you listed, and I think that he could be one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL this year with even number 1 potential. Like, the way he's throwing the ball, you saw it that Thursday night. He's slinging it nonstop. Whether or not that's good for Ezekiel Elliott, that's a different story. But I want me some Dak Prescott shares. Like, outside of Kyler Murray, he was the only other quarterback I was targeting in this draft. I mean, I did like Stafford as well. Not a big fan of Lamar, not a big fan of Brady, but they've obviously all proven their worth. But what is your take? Is there any reason to have 2 good quarterbacks still on your team like that, of that level?
No, I mean, no, and you basically said it all. There's really not, that's just the bottom line. But I will disagree. I don't think that, if we're talking fantasy-wise, I don't think that Dak is by far the better option than Lamar Jackson. I mean, yeah, I think he's better fantasy-wise, but, I mean, I wouldn't say by far. Like, I know you don't like Lamar Jackson that much, but fantasy-wise,
Well, no, Lamar Jackson could put up plenty of points fantasy-wise. Like you said, he has that rushing upside.
I still will take Dak, but I don't think it's by far Dak over Lamar. They're both top 5 fantasy quarterbacks.
Yeah, he might rush for 100 yards, but will pass for 198 and maybe a touchdown and an interception.
Okay, and 100 yards is 10 points, which is 2.5 passing touchdowns in a standard 4-point passing league.
I guess you have it there. I mean,
I'm not saying Lamar over Dak. I agree with you. I would take Dak over Lamar, but it's not by far and away. Like, okay. I disagree with that, but that's not besides the point. The point is that, yeah, I mean, you said it, if you have 2 talented QBs, you definitely want to look to trade one in a 1 QB league, no doubt.
Yeah, trade Lamar, trade Brady. Just gonna say.
Well, if you have all 4 of those guys, you got to trade. I'm sure other teams need a QB, so you got to trade.
Nah,
2 or 3
unless
of
you're
them.
talking about a 2 QB league, but I imagine
Well,
that in
even
that case you start Dak and Lamar. But I
Yes.
imagine these are 2 different leagues.
Yeah, I would assume so.
I want to move on to this next question from Joshua, who asks Javonte Williams, Elijah Mitchell, or Myles Gaskin. Pick 2 PPR. And if I had to guess what Bobby was going to pick, he would say sit Elijah.
Yes, sit Elijah Mitchell for again the reasons we talked about. So.
All right, so just have a few more comments to get to. Let's see, we got through Joshua's. Anthony asks flex Jamal Williams, Cole Beasley, or Bryan Edwards.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Jamal Williams from reasons that I mentioned earlier about him.
All right. Last question that we have so far here. David asks Dak or Brady.
Yeah, I'll take Dak Prescott. You want every piece of that Chargers Dallas game if you can get your hands on it. I mean, even I forgot to mention in the rapid fire real quick, but if you are looking for a desperation buy or just fill in starting receiver, maybe at Odell's out or Fuller, pick up Cedric Wilson and start him. Michael Gallup's out. Cedric Wilson is the 3rd guy in those 3 wide receiver sets. We know how much they're going to throw the ball. Start Cedric Wilson. Pick him up and start him if you need, if you need desperation wide receiver help this week.
I mean, Cedric Wilson had a decent amount of looks even before Gallup went down in that.
And exactly.
First
And now that
Thursday night
Gallup's
game.
down, McCarthy, they love to throw. You know it's going to most likely be a high-scoring game. So yeah, to me, it's I would start Cedric Wilson for sure.
That's gonna be a fun game to
depending on the
watch.
situation. I'm looking forward to it. That's why I like Jared Cook so much this week too, and among others, of course. But yeah, absolutely.
All right, and you talked about it a little bit for Brady. He's coming off a week and a half going against the Atlanta Falcons. You got to like that matchup, right?
Of course, absolutely. I mean, I would start Dak over, but yeah, Brady's a solid start this week. Absolutely.
And how are you feeling about the receiving options on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? And I'm going to list 4 names, and I want you to rank how you think they're going to finish this year. I know it could be hard to tell, but that is Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski, and Antonio Brown.
In terms of overall fantasy points, I would take Godwin, AB, Evans, Gronk. Gronk's, I think he's going to be a good back-end tight end 1, but that game was a little bit of an anomaly. I don't think he's going to be producing that all the time. O.J. Howard and Cameron Braid are getting mixed in, and they will be more so. And then Evans, he had those blow-up games last year, and, I mean, I would not be surprised if they go right to Evans. Evans is a stud receiver. He's had, I don't know how many consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. I don't want to be sorry if they go right back to Evans this week. Godwin, like I mentioned earlier, is that guy. He's seeing the targets. If you had to pick a number 1, I guess, quote unquote, it would be Godwin. Very solid wide receiver. And then Antonio Brown. I mean, he had the chemistry with Brady. He looked a lot more similar to that old AB from Pittsburgh. He's not going to be that, I don't think, because of the target share of the too many mouths to feed here. But they're all going to produce. They all have upside. I think they're all going to have their weeks. They're all going to be startable in fantasy, of course, and they're all valuable to have. And they only help Brady even more because he's the one that benefits the most with having these weapons. So, Godwin, AB, Evans, Gronk. I don't think any of them will finish as top 12 wide receivers. In other words, wide receiver 1s in the standard 12-team league. But they will all be at the wide receiver 2 to 3 range with upside. Gronk, back end, tight end 1 with upside, as we saw from Thursday night. But there's going to be games where the Bucs, they have a good defense, don't forget. There's going to be games where they just dominate so badly, so well defensively that, they might not need to throw the ball so much too. So keep that in mind as well. With Dallas, they had to throw a lot because you see Dallas throwing, and it was kind of a high-scoring, fun game. So that's how I would rank them.
So if they're not throwing a lot, Leonard Fournette or Ronald Jones?
I mean, look, Ronald Jones had his moments last year, and Bruce Arians came out and said he's going to be the starter. So you take with that what you will. I personally don't want to roster any of them because I don't see the upside. Even if one of them goes down, I can't see the upside because Bruce Arians, he messes around. Like if Ronald Jones fumbles, he pulls him out. Like he pulled him out on Thursday. He didn't see him again.
Yeah, but after that fumble, he didn't get a single other touch. And
and
you got one other guy back there, and Gio Bernard. How would you rank him in that mix?
Yeah, I mean, he's the third guy in that mix, but honestly, if you're in a PPR league, I would rather roster Bernard over the both of them because I think Gio Bernard can be that James White for Tom Brady. He played almost every third down snap. He was there in the 2-minute offense. He's a veteran. Brady trusts him, and we know how valuable that role can be with Brady potentially. Now, you might say, oh, well, he only caught 2 passes. Well, keep in mind that, first of all, it's his first game with a new team. Second of all, he was dealing with a high ankle sprain in camp, and he was even questionable for the game. So I think as the season goes along, he's going to get healthier, and he's going to be a nice bench PPR guy that maybe if you're desperate, you can punch in for a bye week fill-in. He might get you 10 points based on like 5 receptions alone. So that's my take on the running back situation there.
All right, so we got a couple more questions before we close this out, both from Dan. First question is a tight end question. That is Mark Andrews or Gronk this week?
That's a very good question. I'm still going to take Mark Andrews here. Gronk, like you said, could very well have a big game, but it's only week 1. You kind of still have to take a step back and look at the draft and kind of see where you took these guys. Mark Andrews, they just paid him, and it could be the Ravens could very well have to throw to keep pace with Kansas City. They might want to get him more involved, especially with Hollywood Brown questionable. So I would go with Mark Andrews there.
All right, and the second question from Dan, Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers?
Patrick Mahomes. Come on.
All right. So
I mean, look, I can somewhat see the question. Like,
while Aaron Rodgers is angrily looking at the camera coming through our slideshow right now.
Really?
He is.
But look, if maybe it's with like Rodgers or Brady or Rodgers or like Stafford, or
you got to start
Rodgers
Mahomes over anyone, pretty much.
You have to start Mahomes over anyone, basically. I mean, it's Patrick Mahomes. He's the best quarterback in the NFL.
Outside of Kyler Murray.
I mean, fantasy-wise, maybe Kyler Murray, but in terms of real-life football, Patrick
right.
Mahomes is the best quarterback.
Yeah, nobody throws the ball, has that escapability like Patrick Mahomes. But, yeah, so actually I did want to touch really quickly before we got to Breakout Player. What are your thoughts on Aaron Rodgers? What are your thoughts on that Green Bay Packers offense? I know we haven't discussed that much. You have a couple minutes to talk about that before we close this off.
It's gonna go one of two ways. Okay, it was either just an anomaly week 1 and the Saints are that good and maybe they weren't prepared and they're going to be back to their own normal selves in week 2 and put on a show and get back to the team that we know from last year. And, you're going to have your Devontaes and your Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones and they're going to be studs. But then there's also the consideration of, if Aaron Rodgers didn't have the best body language in week 1. And, I think that when it comes to having true passion for the game, when you're talking about guys like Russell Wilson and Tom Brady, and then you look at a guy like Aaron Rodgers in terms of showing passion and leadership, Aaron Rodgers doesn't have that.
No, he just wants to host Jeopardy.
He's got Jeopardy. Someone made a tweet said Jeopardy looks awfully nice right now. But look, I can understand where Rodgers is coming from in terms of the Packers, and we talked about on a podcast last year about the Packers organization and how kind of stupid they've been in terms of some of the draft picks and refusing to get Rodgers help. So I get where Rodgers is coming from. At the same time, though, he also has acted like a prima donna as well. And, they're saying that they're teasing that him and Devontae might be their last year. And so that does beg the question. It does make you a little concerned. And it has to. And so you obviously have to start them and expect them in week 2 to go out there and ball out. And look, the deciding factor for me is this. Football is a dangerous, violent sport that if you step on the field, it could be your last time ever stepping on a field because you have potential to risk a career-ending injury. And I don't think Rodgers is just going to go out there if he doesn't want to be there and risk his health and long-term health, especially since he's had injuries in the past. I think that they'll be fine. But, it's still that concern in the back of your mind that could be a distinct possibility of them just completely going off the rails. But I think they'll still be fine.
All right. So just one last question coming in, Joe. We got you. Devonta Parker versus the Bills or Pollard versus the Chargers?
Very, very good question. I'm going to take Devonta Parker, seeing as how Will Fuller's out, and Parker might be one of 2 of his main targets besides Waddle.
Oh, Parker got a good amount of targets in that first game.
Yes, he did get a good amount of targets. And so I think Parker's the play here. Pollard looked good, and they had him involved in that game, but I don't think it's enough compared to Parker's potential target share here to start Devonta Parker over Pollard. So to start Pollard over Parker. So I'm gonna take Devonta Parker.
All right, so we are just about out of time, but we can't leave without doing our Breakout Player of the Week segment. This is where all the four of us, the four hosts of the show, each pick a player that we believe will exceed ESPN's PPR projections. Last week, the winner was John, who is not here today. He picked Corey Davis. Davis won it out. He beat Tyson Williams. But yeah, Davis was the one who most outreached his projections on ESPN. This week, John's pick is Donovan Peoples-Jones. One of our other hosts, Bud, went with another Cleveland Browns wide receiver in Anthony Schwartz. Which leads me to you, Bobby. Who was your pick this week for Breakout Player of the Week?
Yeah, I was trying to decide between Aaron Rodgers, Joe Mixon, Devontae Adams, maybe even Miles Sanders as well, or Juju. But I decided to go with Devontae Adams because I think that they are going to bounce back, and I think he has that 40-plus point game that he's been capable of last season. And so against the bad Detroit defense, we know that for a fact. We saw what Deebo Samuel and the Niners did to them. So bombs away for the Packers. You got to go all in if you're owning the Packers on your roster with the distinct possibility in the back of your mind that it could all go south, which I know you would mind seeing, K-Mac. But yeah, I'm going to take Devontae Adams. He goes for 40-plus.
All right, so my pick for Breakout Player of the Week this week is going to be Latavius Murray. I think he is being well incorporated into that Ravens offense. I think that he did end up getting last week, just very recently being incorporated into the team, get more touches than Tyson Williams. I think that he is only going to get more. That is my opinion. I know that there are a lot of people who are high on Tyson Williams in this show, but I think that this is Latavius Murray. I think he's moving in and he's making his name known there. I still think it is going to be a split backfield. I still think you have Lamar Jackson to contend with, but that is a run-first offense. And for his value this week, I like him as a potential fill-in or flex option if you need to play him. So I think that's the show. I think we're done.
Yeah, I mean, are you going to mention Bud and John's Cleveland wide receiver picks?
I already did, if you were paying attention.
I was too focused on reading about Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell.
Yeah. I mean, you read all you want. You will not get an answer. Last minute, you're going to find out that Trey Sermon isn't going to play again.
Yeah, exactly. No, but real quick, though, I did see something shortly before the game on Twitter, and one of the reporters or someone who was there last week said that Elijah Mitchell was taking, in the warm-ups, the second running back snaps, which usually and I've seen that in the past where that's a good indicator of how they intend to rotate running backs, how a team intends to rotate running backs. So if you can find anything like that, guys, keep that in mind. If you're seeing that Elijah Mitchell's taking first team, that might be a better sign than it might be Mitchell and stuff like that. Obviously, it's not a definite, but just keep that in mind. That could maybe be the difference in helping you decide between a tough start-sit decision. So just FYI on that one.
That being said, you know who's getting first-team snaps for the Las Vegas Raiders?
Peyton Barber.
What are your thoughts on him real quick before we
Don't go near Peyton Barber, man. He's not a good running back. He's a plotter, and they're playing against a very good Steelers defense. So, no, don't go near Peyton Barber. I'm sorry. People are going to be tempted. The guy in our league picked him up. I wouldn't do it. I mean, I don't care how desperate you are. I wouldn't do it.
All right, so you heard it. Don't go after Peyton Barber. All right, so I think that wraps it up for today's show. If you were listening live in the Fantasy Football Discussion Facebook group, really appreciate you coming in with the questions. We are here to answer it every single time. And we are going live every single Sunday usually. I know the last couple of weeks we've done Saturday, but we'll either be here Sunday with your last-minute information or be here on Saturday night to answer your Saturday night questions as well. We also released our waiver show last Tuesday. That could be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or the likes, and we will be releasing another waiver show this week. So, Bobby, any last things you want to say?
I said it on the previous podcast. I mentioned all my concerns and stuff that I have here. But at the same time, don't panic and overreact. You can be concerned, okay, but don't panic. There's a difference there. It's just week one, especially with the extra game. just relax. Don't panic. Don't do anything crazy, like really crazy. Just relax. You drafted your guys. Chill out for a second. Then if it's 2-3 weeks in advance and still the same, then you can start to kind of panic. But you can be concerned. Just don't panic and don't overreact for week 1. And like K-Mac said, I want to emphasize that keep an eye out on waivers for these next few weeks too. You can find league winners.
Yep, you could find some gold for sure. All right, so for Bobby Digital Janas, I'm Kevin K-Mac Macartney, and we will see you on Tuesday.